Hello friends, welcome to the YouTube channel. I got a good one for you today. His name is Paul Harvey. Who was Paul Harvey? He was an American radio broadcaster for ABC News Radio. He broadcasts news and comment on morning and midday on weekdays and at noon Saturday, and also his famous Rest of the Story segment. From 1951 to 2008, his programs reached as many as 24 million people per week. This man was a good man. He had also received the Medal of Honor by former President George Bush in his 90s. He died at the age of 90, to be correct. The reason I'm talking about this man today is because he has, I guess, a poem, you will say, entitled If I Were the Devil. Friends, once you listen to this, you're like, how did he know this stuff, right? How did Paul Harvey know so much? It feels prophetic listening to what this man is talking about in this stuff. And again, I want to remind you, this was written in 1964. He read it in 1965. He has gotten so much attention online because when you look at what's going on in the world and in this country specifically, you begin to realize, wow, the devil has pulled a good one on us. The devil's master tricks, the arch deceiver, has managed to mislead masses of Americans through policies and corruption. Who knows? Religious bigotry, who knows? But Satan has managed to deceive, mislead, destroy, and corrupt our society. And Paul Harvey knew this was coming. It feels as though it was inspired by God. It feels prophetic from my perspective, okay? You don't have to agree with me. This is my thought. Listen, we have to listen to this. One of the reasons why also, I want to talk about Paul Harvey. Another reason, Joe Rogan reacted to this. Even Joe Rogan was shocked. So I'm going to play a segment of that from Joe Rogan podcast as well. And Paul Harvey had an understanding of Ellen White, by the way. So what we're going to do now, we're going to play a segment of Paul Harvey's from the Joe Rogan podcast. For those of you who don't know, Joe Rogan has the largest podcast in the world right now. Part of the reason why I talk about Joe Rogan is because he's good, man. He's just good. All right, so even Joe Rogan was shocked to hear the accuracy of the words of Paul Harvey. So we're going to have to play a segment of that.
Paul Harvey, you know who that is?
Sure.
So he did a thing, God, back in the 60s or 70s, and he equated it to the devil. And maybe it is. Or you could also say it's just that. But he did a radio piece on how to destroy America, the social fabric of it.
So let's move on now to where he begins to watch that.
And I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please.
So this stuff was so good. We're going to play that whole segment. But listen to what he says at the end.
Right on doing what he's doing.
What year was that?
It was 65, but...
Holy.
1965.
That's amazing. 65. Wow. April 3rd, 1965, Paul.
Yeah. So you have an idea of the power that is behind that. So with that being said, brace yourself, sit tight. Let's take a listen to this and watch how powerful and prophetic and accurate these words are in our lifetime today.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey.
Wow, boy. There's so much truth in this. If I were the devil, I will encourage schools to refine young intellect, but to neglect to discipline emotions. Boy, ain't that the truth? We have schools that are creating people with intellectuals, but that are absolutely out of control. You don't discipline emotions in school. You have this rampant of sexual perversion and confusion and mental health, while some of these people have some of the highest degrees. This is the result of the devil's work. Any part of this video you touch, you can get something. I could evict God from the courthouse, and then from the schoolhouse, and then from the House of Congress. Yeah. How about that? Now we get it. Church and state must always remain separated. But it's one thing to separate church and state, but it's another thing to remove morality out of the state. You see, it's two different things. It's one thing to remove godly principles from the country. That's an extreme. You see, it's one thing you have a denomination that is ruling a particular state. That's a problem. But when you remove any biblical God-fearing principles from a nation, you have a much bigger problem. Listen, any part of this you touch is fire. Any part of this you touch, get rid of the Bible, the wisdom of the serpent. Do as you please. Isn't that the spirit of the age? You can't say nothing against anybody's way of life, my experience, relativism, subjective reality. It's all about my feelings and my thoughts and my truth. No, truth is objective and God is the author of it. He's the way, the truth, and the life. But society is being taught the teaching that says there's no more absolute truth. The author, the Russian author, from his book Crime and Punishment, there's a quotation that goes like this: if there is no immortality, there is no virtue, and all things are permissible. And we have come to a place in our society is like, hey man, let it all hang out. There is no restraint of the passion. That which is evil and sinful and dark is promoted. Listen to this. I will take from those who have and will give to those who want it. You know what this is talking about? This is fascism. And this is how I know Paul Harvey wasn't coming from a prophetic standpoint. He's coming from a historical standpoint. Paul Harvey was looking back so that he could see forward. Paul Harvey lives in the 1960s, in the 1900s. He had an understanding of what happened in Germany with Hitler. He understood the fascistic laws and the communistic propagandas that were rooming during those times. He saw the results of these things. He understood the etymology, the origin of these things, and what they have led to. This is why he's able to put words like this together. This was a man who studied the spirit of the age, and he's able to see that history doesn't just repeat itself. History oftentimes rhymes, as Mark Twain says it, even though I'm not a big fan of Mark Twain. And what's happening in our society today, friends? We are seeing the passion let loose, the wickedness run wild, the sinful ways, things that were once in the closet is out of the closet, is no longer creeping, is running compromise. Because the passion has been loosened. If I were the devil, I would take from those who have and will give to those who want it. This is also addressing the illegal migrants that's happening in our country as well. Open borders policy. These folks are allowed to come illegally, and they can do all kind of wickedness. They live off taxpayer dollars. They live better than the average Americans who's working for years, saving their money and paying taxes into the system. These folks are allowed to come under supposed, how do I call this? Social justice? Democratic run policies, allowing folks to come into this country, open borders, and you can't speak against it. Oh, you're a xenophobe. I'll tell you what, boy. Paul Harvey was on top of his game. He saw it coming, and he prophesied. He spoke these things in existence because he had an idea of the historical application. He lived to see the impact of the devil's games. And let me tell you something. There are no new deceptions. There's only new players. The Bible says everything that you see today has already been. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9, the things that has been is that which shall be, and that which is done it is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. This is why it's good to read history. Somebody once says, the farther you look back is the clearer you can see the future. And if you want to know where we are headed, just take a look at what has been before. For that which has been, it is that which shall be. That which is done, it is that which shall be done. And God requireth that which is past. In other words, God commands us to study the past. But our country is not in a good condition. Our nation is in disarray. Paul Harvey was on point. He saw it coming. Lord have mercy. Share your thought and a perspective with me. I want to hear from you. What do you think about this? Have a good one. Bye.